Section 3 of Sasha. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Sasha by Alexander Kuprin. Translated by Douglas Ashby. Section 3. The Army Ensign. Part 1. Prologue. Last summer, one of my nearest friends inherited from an aunt of his a small farm in the Z district of the government of Podol. After looking through the things that had fallen to his lot, he found in an attic a huge iron-bound trunk stuffed with old-fashioned books with the letter T printed like a CH, from the yellowish leaves of which came a scent of moldiness, of dried-up flowers, of mice, and of camphor, all blended together. The books were chiefly odd volumes of faded Russian authors of the early 19th century, including an epistolary manual and the Book of Solomon. Among these assortment were letters and papers, mostly of a business nature and wholly uninteresting, but one rather thick bundle wrapped up in gray packing paper and tied carefully with a piece of string roused in my friend a certain curiosity. It proved to contain the diary of an infantry officer named Lapshine and several leaves of a beautiful rough Bristol paper decorated with irises and covered with a small feminine handwriting. At the end of these pages was the signature Kate, but many of them bore the single letter K. There could be no doubt that Lapshine's diary and Kate's letters were written at about the same time and concerned the same events, which took place some 25 years or so ago. Not knowing what to do with his find, my friend posted the package to me. In offering it now to my readers, I must confess that my own pen has dealt only very slightly with it, merely correcting the grammar here and there and obliterating numerous affectations and quotation marks and brackets. 1. September 5th. Boredom, boredom, and again boredom. Is my whole life going to pass in this gray, colorless, lazy, crawling way? In the morning, squad drill and this sort of thing. Efimenko, what is a sentry? A sentry is an inviolable person, Your Honor. Why is he an inviolable person? Because no one dares to touch him, Your Honor. Sit down. Thatch cook, what is a sentry? A sentry is an inviolable person, Your Honor, and so on endlessly. Then dinner at the mess, vodka, stale stories, dull conversations about the difficulty nowadays of passing from the rank of captain to that of colonel, long discussions about examinations, and more vodka. Someone finds a marrowbone in his soup, and this is called an event to be celebrated by extra drinks. Then 2 hours of leaden sleep, and in the evening once more the same inviolable person and the same endless firing in file. How often have I begun this very diary? It always seemed to me, I don't know why, that destiny must at last throw into my everyday life some big, unusual event which will leave indelible traces on my soul for the rest of my life. Perhaps it will be love. I often dream of some beautiful, unknown, mysterious woman whom I shall meet some day, a woman who is weary and distressed as I am now. Haven't I a right to my own bit of happiness? I'm not stupid. I can hold my own in society. I am even rather witty, if I am not feeling shy and happen to have no rival close at hand. As to my appearance, naturally it is difficult for me to judge it, but I think I am not too bad. Though on rainy autumn mornings I confess that my own face in the looking-glass strikes me as loathsome. The ladies of our regiment find something of Lermontov's Pechorin about me. However, this merely proves, in the first place, the poorness of the regimental libraries, and secondly, the immortality of the Pechorin type in infantry regiments. With a dim presentiment of this strip of life in front of me, I've begun my diary several times, intending to note down every small detail so as to live it over again afterwards, if only in memory, as fully and clearly as possible. But day after day passed with the same monotonous sameness. The extraordinary made no start, and losing all taste for the dry routine of regimental annals, I would throw my diary aside on the shelf for long intervals, and then burn it with other rubbish when changing my quarters. September 7th. A whole week has gone by already since I got back from manoeuvres. The season for open-air work has begun, and squad after squad is told off to dig beetroots on the estates of the neighboring landowners. Only our squad and the 11th are left. The town is more dead and alive than ever. This dusty, stuffy heat, this daytime silence of a provincial town, broken only by the frantic bawling of cocks, gets on my nerves and depresses me. Really, I am beginning to miss the nomad life of manoeuvres which struck me as so unendurable at the time. How vividly the not very complicated pictures of army movements come back to my memory, and what a softening charm memory gives to them. I can see it all clearly now. Early morning, the sun not yet risen. The cold sky looks down at the rough old bell tent, full of holes. The morning stars scarcely twinkle with their silvery gleam. The bivouac has livened up and is bustling with life. One hears the sounds of running about, the undertone of angry voices, the crack of rifles, the neigh of wagon horses. You make a desperate effort and crawl out from under the hairy blanket which has become white from the night dew. You crawl straight out into the open air because you cannot stand in the low tent, but only lie or sit down. The orderly, who has been beating a devil's tattoo with his boot on the samovar, which of course is strictly forbidden, hurries off to get water, bringing it straight from the stream in a little brass kettle. Stripped to the waist, you wash in the open air, and a slight, fine, rosy steam curls up from your hands, face, and body. Here and there between the tents, officers have improvised fires from the very straw on which they have spent the night, and are now sitting round them, shriveled up from cold and gulping down hot tea. A few minutes later the tents are struck, and there, where just now the white linen town had sported itself, are merely untidy heaps of straw and scraps of paper. The din of the roused bivouac deepens. The whole field is swarming with soldiers' figures in white Russian blouses, their grey overcoats rolled over their shoulders. At first glance there seems absolutely no order in this grey, ant-like agitation, but the trained eye will note how gradually thick heaps are formed out of it, and how gradually each of these heaps extends into a long regular line. The last of the late-comers rush up to their squads, munching a piece of bread on the way or fastening the strap of a cartridge case. In another minute the squads, their rifles clinking against each other, form into a regular enormous square in the middle of the field. And then the tiring march of from 30 to 40 versts. The sun rises higher and higher. About 8 o'clock the heat makes itself felt, and the soldiers begin to be bored. Their marching becomes slack, and they sing listlessly the regular marching songs. Every minute the dust gets thicker, enfolding in a long yellow cloud the whole column, which extends for a full verst along the road. The dust falls in brown layers on the soldiers' shirts and faces, and through this background their teeth and the whites of their eyes flash as if they were Negroes. In the thick, dusty column it is difficult to distinguish a private from an officer. Also, for the time being, the difference of rank is modified, and one cannot help getting acquainted with the Russian soldier, with his shrewd outlook on all sorts of things, even on complicated things like manoeuvres, with his practical good sense and his adaptability under all sorts of conditions, with his biting word pictures and expressions seasoned as they are with a rough spiciness to which one turns a deaf ear. What do we meet on the road? A Ukrainian in large white trousers is walking lazily beside a pair of grey shorthorns, and on the roadside a peddler, a velvety field ploughed for the winter crop. Everything invites investigating questions and remarks, impregnated either with a deep, almost philosophical understanding of simple everyday life, or with pointed sarcasm, or with an irrepressible stream of gaiety. It is getting dark when the regiment nears the place for its night camp. One sees the cooks already round the large smoky squad cauldrons placed in the field aside from the road. Halt! Pile arms! In a twinkling the field is covered with stately files of little wigwams, and then an hour or two later you are once more lying under the canvas, full of holes, through which you see the twinkling stars in the dark sky, while your ears note the gradual quieting down of the sleeping camp. But still for a long time you catch from the distance separate sounds, softened by the sad quietude of evening. At times the monotonous scraping of a harmonica reaches your ear, sometimes an angry voice, undoubtedly the sergeant major's, sometimes the sudden neigh of a colt, and the hay under one's head blends its delicate aroma with the almost bitter smell of the dewy grass. September 8th. Today my squad's commandant, Vasily Akinfeevich, asked me whether I should like to go with him to the autumn work. He has arranged for the squad very advantageous terms with Mr. Oblyanov's manager. Almost 2.5 kopecks of food. The work will consist of digging the beetroot for the local sugar factory. This does not tire the soldiers, who do it very willingly. All these circumstances had probably put the captain in such a rainbow mood that he not only invited me to go with him to the work, but even in the event of my accepting, offered me 1.5 rubles a day out of the money payable to himself. No other squad commandant had ever shown such generosity towards his subalterns. I have rather curious, I should say rather mixed feelings towards Vasily Akinfeevich. In the service I find him insupportable. There he parades all his angry rudeness almost conscientiously. At squad drill he thinks nothing of shouting out before the men at a young officer, "Lieutenant, please take hold of your men. You walk like a deacon in a procession." Even if it's funny, that sort of thing is cruel and tactless. Vasily Akinfeevich metes out justice with his own fists, a measure which not one of the platoon commanders would ever dare to take. The men like him, and what is more important than anything else, believe his word. They all know very well that he will not draw a kopeck out of the ration money, but will be more likely to add something like 25 rubles a month out of his own pocket, and that he will permit no one under him to be wronged, but on the contrary will take up the cudgels for him, even with the colonel. The men know all this, and I am sure that in the event of war they would all follow to the last Vasily Akinfeevich without hesitation, even to obvious death. I dislike particularly his exaggerated horror of everything noble. In his mind the word nobility suggests the impression of stupid dandyism, unnaturalness, utter incapacity in the service, cowardice, dances, and the guards. He can't even pronounce the word nobility without a shade of the most bitter sarcasm, drawing it out to its last letter. However, one must add that Vasily Akinfeevich has been toiling up from the ranks step by step, and at the period when he received his commission, the unfortunate rankers had a rough time of it with the little aristocrats of the mess. He finds it hard to make friends, as every inveterate bachelor does, but when he takes a fancy to someone he opens with his purse, his naive, kindly, and clean soul. But even when opening his soul, Vasily Akinfeevich puts no check on his language. This is one of his worst traits. I think he rather likes me in his way. As a matter of fact, I am not such a bad officer of the line. When I am hard up, I borrow from him freely, and he never duns me. When we are off duty, he calls me Army Ensign. This odd rank died out of the service long ago, but old officers like to use it playfully in memory of their youth. Sometimes I feel sorry for him, sorry for a good man whose life has been absorbed in the study of a thin army regulation book and in minute attention to regimental routine. I'm sorry for the poorness of his mental outlook, which allows him no interest in anything beyond his narrow horizon. In a word, I feel the same sort of sorrowful pity for him that comes to one involuntarily when one looks long and attentively into the eyes of a very intelligent dog. Here I pull myself up. Am I aiming at anything myself? Does my captive thought really struggle so impatiently? At any rate, Vasily Akinfyevitch has done something in his life. He has 2 St. Georges on his breast, and the scar of a Circassian sabre on his forehead. As for the men under him, they have such fat, merry mugs that it makes one cheerful to look at them. Can I say as much for myself? I said that I would go to the digging with pleasure. Perhaps it will be a distraction. The manager has a wife and 2 daughters. 2 or 3 landowners live near. Who knows? There may be a little romance. Tomorrow we start. September 11th. We arrived this morning at the railway station of Konsky Brod. The manager of the estate, advised of our coming by telegram, had sent a carriage to meet Vasily Akinfyevitch and myself. My word, I never drove in anything so smart in my life before. It was a 4-in-hand coach, magnificent horses, cushiony tires, studded harness, driven by a healthy-looking lad who wore an oilcloth cap and a scarf round his waist. It is about 8 versts to Olkovatka. The road is perfect and smooth, level, straight as an arrow, lined on both sides with thick pyramid-like poplars. On the way we constantly met long files of carts loaded to the very top with cloth bags full of sugar. Apropos of this, Vasily Akinfyevitch tells me that the output of the Olkovatka factory is about 100,000 poods of sugar every year. That is a respectable figure, particularly in view of the fact that Obolyanyov is the sole proprietor of the business. The manager met us at the farm buildings. He has a German surname, Berger, but there's nothing German about his appearance or his accent. In my opinion, he's more like Falstaff, whom I saw somewhere at an exhibition. I think it was in Petersburg, when I went there to pass my unlucky examination at the Academy of the General Staff. He is extraordinarily fat, the fat almost transparent. It shines on his flabby cheeks, which are covered with a network of small red veins. His hair is short, straight, and grizzly. His moustache sticks out on each side in warrior-like brushes. He wears a short imperial under his lower lip. Beneath the thick, disheveled eyebrows, his quick, sly eyes are oddly narrowed by the tautness of the cheeks and cheekbones. The lips, particularly the smile, reveal a merry, sensual, jolly, very observant man. I think he is deaf, because he has a habit of shouting when he talks to one. Berger seemed pleased at our arrival. To people like him, a listener and a boon companion are more necessary than air. He kept running up to one or the other of us, and seizing us round the waist, would repeat, "Welcome, gentlemen, you are welcome." To my amazement, Vasily Akinfyevitch liked him. I did too. Berger showed us into a pavilion where 4 rooms had been prepared for us, provided with everything necessary and unnecessary on such a large scale that we might have been coming to spend 3 years there instead of a month. The captain was apparently pleased with these attentions from the owner of the place, but once, when Berger opened a drawer of his writing table and showed a whole box of long, excellent cigars placed there for us, Vasily Akinfyevitch grumbled in his undertone, "This is a bit too much. This is nobility and all that sort of thing." Incidentally, I have forgotten to mention his habit of adding "and all that sort of thing" to almost every word he says, and, taking him all around, he is not exactly an eloquent captain. While placing us, so to speak, in possession, Berger was very fussy and shouted a great deal. We did our best to thank him. Finally, he seemed to get tired, and wiping his face with an enormous red handkerchief, he asked us if there was anything else we wanted. We, of course, hastened to assure him that we had more than enough. On leaving us, Berger said, "I'll put a boy at your disposal at once. You will be kind enough to order for yourself breakfast, lunch, dinner, and supper, according to your wishes. The butler will come to you every evening for this purpose. Our wine cellar, too, is at your disposal." We spent the whole day in installing the soldiers, with their rifles and ammunition, in empty sheds. In the evening the groom brought us cold veal, a brace of roast snipe, a sort of tart with pistachio nuts, and several bottles of red wine. We had scarcely seated ourselves at the table when Berger appeared. "You're at dinner. That's first rate," he said. "I've brought you a little bottle of old Hungarian. My dead father had it in his cellar for 20 years. We had our own estate near Gysina. Make no mistake about us, we Bergers are the lineal descendants of the Teutonic Knights. As a matter of fact, I have the right to the title of Baron, but what good would it be to me? The arms of the nobility require gilt, and that has vanished long ago from ours. You're welcome here, defenders of the throne and the fatherland." However, judging by the measures of precaution with which he extracted the musty bottle from a side pocket of his nankin jacket, I'm inclined to think that the old Hungarian was preserved in the master's cellar, and not at all on our own estate near Gysina. The wine was really magnificent. It is true that it completely paralyzes one's feet, deprives one's gestures of their ordinary expressiveness, and makes the tongue sticky, but one's head remains clear all the time, and one's spirits gay. Berger tells stories funnily and with animation. He chattered the whole evening about the landlord's income, the luxury of his life in Petersburg, his orangery, his stables, the salaries he paid to his employees. At first Berger represented himself as the head manager of the business, but half an hour later he let the cat out of the bag. It seems that among the managers of the estate and the employees at the factory, Falstaff occupies one of the humblest positions. He is merely the overseer of the farm at Olkovatka, just an accountant with a salary of 900 rubles a year, and everything found except his clothes. "Why should one man have such a lot?" the captain asked naively, and apparently struck by the colossal figures of income and expenditure that Falstaff was pouring out so generously. Falstaff made a cunning face. "Everything will go to the only daughter. Well, there you are, young man." He gave me a playful dig in the ribs with his thumb. "Make up your mind to marry, and then don't forget the old man." I asked with the careless air of one who has seen too much, "And is she pretty?" Falstaff grew purple with laughter. "Ha, ha, he's biting! Excellent, my warrior, excellent! Prepare to rush, rush! Tra-ta-ta-ta! I like the military way." Then suddenly, as if a spring had been pressed, he stopped laughing. "How can I answer you? It depends on one's taste. She is too subtle, too thinnish." "Nobility," put in the captain with a grimace. "As much as you like of that, and she's proud. She doesn't want to know any of the neighbors. Oh, and she's unmanageable. The servants dread her more than fire. Not that she's one to shout at you or rebuke you. There's none of that about her. With her it's just bring me this, do this, go, and also coldly, without moving her lips." "Nobility," said the captain, putting his nose in the air spitefully. We sat like this till 11 o'clock. Towards the end, Falstaff was quite knocked out and went to sleep on his chair, snoring lightly and with a peaceful smile round his eyes. We woke him up with difficulty, and he went home, respectfully supported under the elbow by our boy. I have forgotten to mention that he is a bachelor, a fact which, to tell the truth, upsets my own plans. It's an odd fact how terribly a day at a new place drags, and at the same time how few impressions remain from it. Here I am writing these lines, and I seem to have been living in Olkovatka for a long, long time, 2 months at least, and my tired memory cannot recall any definite event. September 12th. Today I had been looking over the whole place. The owner's house, or as the peasants about here call it, the palace, is a long stone building of 1 story, with plate-glass windows, balconies, and 2 lions at the entrance. Yesterday it did not strike me as so big as it did today. Flower beds lie in front of the house. The paths separating them are spread with reddish sand. In the middle there is a fountain with shiny globes on pedestals, and a light prickly hedge runs round the front. Behind the house are the pavilion, the offices, the cattle and fowl yards, the stud boxes, the barns, the orangery, and, last of all, a thick, shady garden of some 11 acres, with streams, grottos, pretty little hanging bridges in a lake with swans. It is the first time in my life that I have lived side by side with people who spend on themselves tens, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, people who scarcely know the meaning of not being able to do something. Wandering aimlessly through the garden, I could not take my thoughts off this, to me, incomprehensible, strange, and at the same time attractive existence. Do they think and feel just as we do? Are they conscious of the superiority of their position? Do the trifles which burden our lives ever come into their heads? Do they know what we go through when we come in contact with their higher sphere? I am inclined to think that all that means nothing to them, that they ask themselves no inquisitive questions, that the gray monotony of our lives seems just as uninteresting to them, just as natural and ordinary for us, as, for example, the sight of my orderly, Parkhomenko, is to me. All this, of course, is in the nature of things, but for some reason or other it hurts my pride. I am revolted by the consciousness that in the society of these people, polished up and well-glossed by 100 years of luxurious habits and refined etiquette, I, yes I, no one else, will appear funny, odd, unpleasant, even by my way of eating and making gestures, by my expressions and appearance, perhaps even by my tastes and acquaintances. In a word, in me rings the protest of a human being who, created in the image and resemblance of God, has either lost one and the other in the flight of time, or has been robbed of them by someone. I can imagine how Vasily Akinfyevitch would snort if I read these reflections to him. September 13th. Although today is the fatal number, the devil's dozen, it has turned out quite interesting. I have been wandering about the garden again. I don't remember where I read a comparison of nature in autumn with the astonishing unexpected charm which sometimes permeates the faces of young women who are condemned to a swift and certain death from consumption. Today I cannot get this strange comparison out of my head. There is in the air a strong and delicate aroma of fading maple trees, which is like the bouquet of good wine. One's feet bruise the dead yellow leaves which lie in thick layers over the path. The trees have a bright and fantastic covering as though decked out for a banquet of death. Green branches, surviving here and there, are curiously blended with autumn tints of lemon or straw or orange or pink and blood crimson, sometimes passing into mauve and purple. The sky is dense and cold, but its cloudless blue caresses the eye, and in all this bright death feast one catches an indefinable, languid sadness which contracts one's heart in a pain that is lingering and sweet. I was walking along a pathway beneath acacias, interlaced so as to form a thick, almost dark arch. Suddenly my ear caught a woman's voice saying something with great animation and laughter. On a seat just where the thick wall of acacias curved into something like an alcove sat two young girls. I took them for girls at once, and later on I found that I was right. I could not see their faces very well, but I noticed that the eldest, a brune, had the provoking, luxuriant appearance of a Ukrainian, and that the younger, who looked like a flapper, was wearing a white silk handkerchief negligently thrown on her head with one corner pulled down on her forehead, thus concealing the upper part of the face. All the same, I succeeded in catching a glimpse of laughing pink lips and the gay shining of her white teeth as, without noticing my presence, she went on telling something, probably very amusing, in English to her companion. For some time I hesitated. Shall I go on, or shall I go back? If I go on, shall I salute them or not? Once more I was overwhelmed by yesterday's doubts of my plebeian soul. On the one hand, I was thinking, if they are not the hosts of this place, these girls are probably guests. In a way, I too am a guest, and therefore on an equal footing. But on the other hand, does Hermann Holt permit bowing to unknown ladies in his rules of etiquette? Won't my bowing seem odd to these girls, or what will still be worse, won't they regard it as the respectfulness of an employee, of a hired man? Each point of view seemed to me equally dreadful. However, after thinking it over like this, I walked on. The dark one was the first to catch the rustle of leaves under my feet, and she quickly whispered something to the girl in the silk dress, indicating me with her eyes. As I came up to them, I raised my hand to the peak of my cap without looking at them. I felt rather than saw that they both slowly and almost imperceptibly bent their heads. They watched me as I moved away. I knew this by the sense of awkwardness and discomfort which attentive eyes fixed on my back always give me. At the very end of the alley I turned round. The same second, as it often happens, the girl with the white handkerchief glanced in my direction. I heard some kind of exclamation in English, and then a burst of sonorous laughter. I blushed. Both the exclamation and the laughter were certainly intended for me. In the evening Falstaff came to us again, this time with some wonderful cognac, and once more he told us something incredible about his ancestors who had taken part in the Crusades. I asked him quite carelessly, "Do you know who those two young girls are whom I met in the garden today? One is a fresh-looking brune, and the other is almost a little girl in a light grey dress." He gave me a broad grin, wrinkling up the whole of his face and causing his eyes to completely disappear. Then he shook his finger at me slyly. "Ah, my son of Mars, so you're on the fish-hook. Well, 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 don't get angry. I'll stop, I will really. But all the same, it's interesting. Well, I suppose I must satisfy your curiosity. The younger one is our young lady, Katerina Andreevna, the one I told you about, the heiress. You can't call her a little girl. It's only to look at she's so thin, but she's a good 20 years old." "Really?" "Yes, if not more. Oh, she's such an imp. But the little brunette, that's the one to my taste, all eggs and cream and butter." Falstaff smacked his lips carnivorously. "That's the kind of little pie I love. Her name is Lydia Ivanovna, such a kind, simple girl, and dying to get married. She's a distant relation of the Oblianinovs, but she's poor, so she's just staying here as a friend. Oh, well, damn them all," he wound up suddenly, waving his hand. "Let's get on with the cognac." Inwardly I had to agree with this last opinion. What do I care about those girls whom I saw today, when tomorrow we may be off in different directions and may never hear of each other again? Late in the night, after Falstaff had left us, the boy again balancing him respectfully, this time by the waist, when I was already in bed, Vasily Akinfyevitch came to me, half undressed, with slippers on his bare feet and a candle in his hand. "Well, young man," he said, yawning and rubbing his hairy chest, "will you explain one thing to me? Here we are, fed on all sorts of delicatessen, and given their best old wine to drink, and a boy at our disposal, and cigars, and all that sort of thing. But they won't invite us to their own table, will they? Now, why is this? Kindly solve that problem." Without waiting for my answer, he went on in a sarcastic tone. "Because, my dear old chap, all these nobility people and all that sort of thing are most refined diplomats. Yes, yes. What is their way of doing it? I made a good study of their sort on different voluntary work. I know the type. He will be amiable to you and will serve you up dinners. Justice compels me to add that the captain mispronounced the word serve, and cigars and all that sort of thing. But all the same, you feel that he looks on you as on a low worm. And notice, Lieutenant, it's only the great aristocrats," here, as if out of irony, he purposely mutilated the word, "who have this attitude towards our fellow man. The simpler sort, the more doubtful ones, swagger and put on more airs. Immediately that type will sport an eyeglass round his lips and imagine that he's a bird. But as for the real sort, the first thing with them is simplicity, because there's no reason for them to put on airs when right in their own blood they feel scorn for our fellow man. And it all comes out very naturally and charmingly, and all that sort of thing." Having finished this accusing speech, Vasily Akinovitch turned round and went off to his own room. "Well, Perhaps he's right in his own way, but all the same it seems to me rather bad taste to laugh at strangers behind their backs. September 14th. Today I met them both in the garden. They walked with their arms round each other's waists. The little one, her head on her companion's shoulder, was humming something with half-closed eyes. Seeing them, it suddenly occurred to me that these chance rambles of mine might be misinterpreted. I turned quickly into a side path. I don't know that they saw me, but apparently I must choose another time for my walks, or risk seeming an army intruder. September 15th. Lydia Ivanovna started this evening for the station. She will probably not return to Olkovatka. First of all, because she has been followed by a respectable quantity of luggage. Secondly, because she and the daughter of the house said goodbye to each other rather long and affectionately. Apropos of this, I saw for the first time from my window Andrei Alexandrovich himself with his wife. He's quite a fine-looking type, stately, broad-shouldered, with the cut of an old hussar. His grey hair is worn à la Russe. His chin is clean-shaven, his moustache long, downy, and silvery, and his eyes are like a hawk's, only blue, but just the same as the hawk's, round, shrunken, motionless, and cold. His wife gives one the impression of a frightened and modest person. She holds her head a little on one side, and a smile, half guilty and half pitiful, is always on her lips. The face is yellow, but kind. In her youth she was probably very beautiful, but now she looks much older than her age. There is also a bent old woman on the balcony. She wore a black headdress and greenish curls, and she came out leaning on a stick and hardly able to drag her feet after her. She wanted, I think, to say something, but she began coughing, shook her stick in a despairing sort of way, and disappeared. September 16th. Vasily Akinfyevich has asked me to look after the work until he can get rid of his fit of bulk and rheumatism. Pay particular attention, he said, to the delivery of the beetroot. The soldiers are already complaining because the foreman here gives them overweight. To tell the truth, I am rather afraid that in the end there'll be trouble over this. The soldiers have been working in threes. They have already practically finished their contract. One digs out the beetroot from the ground with a shovel, while two cut it up with knives and clean it. These sets of three are usually formed from soldiers of the same strength and skill. There is no point in choosing a bad one, as he would only be in the way of the others. I read somewhere or other, I think in the Indicator, the reflections of a leisurely thinker, who says that there is no advantage at all in this sort of work, that clothes get torn and soldiers undisciplined. This is absolutely false. Never is there such a confident, almost relation-like feeling between officers and privates as at this sort of free work. If one admits that the soldier needs holidays during his hard military training, there is no better rest for him than the toil in the fields which he loves. But all the money earned in this way must go to the soldiers without any middleman. Each knows where the shoe pinches. And our people are admirable workers. Hired peasants wouldn't do half the work. There is only one exception. Zamachnikov, who as usual does nothing. Zamachnikov is the spoilt favorite of the whole squad, from the captain down to the last private. Nikifor Spazov, this same Spazov with his lame leg and the white spot on his right eye, has been for the last 4 years a walking and a crying reproach to the military service. It is true that during the whole period of service, Zamachnikov has been unable to master the vowels in the alphabet, and has shown a really exceptional stupidity in regard to book learning. But you could not find in the whole regiment such a spirited singing leader, such a good teller of stories, such a jack of all trades, and a merry andrew to boot. He apparently knows what his rôle is very well, and looks upon it in the light of a military duty. On march he sings almost without stopping, and his lashing, spirited talk often wrings a laugh of appreciation from the tired soldiers, and gives them a moral shake-up. Vasily Akinovich, though he keeps Zamachnikov under arms more often than the rest, for which Zamachnikov bears him no grudge, confessed to me once that a stirrer-up like him is a perfect treasure in wartime and difficult circumstances. Zamaknikov, however, is no mere clown and sham, and for this I like him personally. Life in him simply boils up unrestrainedly and never allows him to sit quiet for a minute. Here he was today, passing from work party to work party, and finally arriving at a woman's department. He started a long dialogue with the Ukrainians, which made the soldiers near him leave their work and roll on the ground with laughter. I can hear from a distance his imitations of the brisk, shrill quarrels of women, and then again the lazy talk of an old Ukrainian. On catching sight of me, he puts on a preoccupied look and fumbles on the ground. "Well, my fellow countrywoman," he asks, "which of you has sent my shovel to perdition?" I shout at him and endeavor to make my face severe. He stands to attention, carrying himself as he always does before an officer, with a graceful vigor, but in his kind blue eyes there still trembles the little fire of his interrupted merriment. September 17th. Our acquaintance has taken place, but under exceptionally comic conditions. Why should I hide it from myself? I secretly longed for this acquaintance, but if I could have foreseen that it would happen as it happened today, I should have refused it. The stage was again the garden. I have already written that there is a lake. It has a little round island in the middle, overgrown with thick bushes. On the shore facing the house is a rather small wharf, and near it a flat-bottomed boat is moored. In this boat Katerina Andreevna was sitting as I passed, holding the sides of the boat with both hands and bending forward first on one side and then on the other. She was trying to balance and shove off the heavy boat which had struck fast on the slimy bottom of the lake. She wore a sailor costume, open at the throat, allowing one to see her thin white neck and even her thin little collar bones, which stood out under the muscular tension. A small gold chain hid itself in her dress, but I gave her only a passing glance, and having once more given her a half salute, I turned away with my usual modest dignity. At that moment the girl's voice, fresh and merry, called out suddenly, "Will you please be so kind?" At first I thought this exclamation was meant for someone else who was walking behind me, and involuntarily I glanced back. She was looking at me, smiling and nodding emphatically. "Yes, yes, yes, you! Will you be so kind as to help me shove off this wretched boat? I'm not strong enough by myself." I made her a most gallant bow, bending my body forward and lifting my left leg back, after which I ran eagerly down to the water, and made another bow just as ceremoniously as the first. I must have looked fine, I imagine. The lady was now standing up in the boat, still laughing, and saying, "Push it away just a little, then I'll manage it myself." I seized the bow of the boat with both hands, with my legs spread wide apart so as to preserve my balance. Then I warned her with refined politeness, "Will you be kind enough to sit down, mademoiselle? The push may be a very vigorous one." She sits down, stares at me with laughing eyes, and says, "Really, I'm ashamed to trespass like this on your kindness." "Oh, it's nothing, mademoiselle." The fact that she is watching me gives my movements a certain gracefulness. I'm a good gymnast, and nature has given me a fair amount of physical strength, but in spite of my efforts, the boat does not stir. "Please don't take so much trouble," I hear a tender little voice saying. "It's probably too heavy, and it may hurt you. Really, The sentence hangs unfinished in the air. Her doubt on my strength gives it a tenfold force. A mighty effort, a push, a crash. The boat flies off like an arrow, while I, in accordance with all the laws of equilibrium, splash full length into the mud. When I get up, I find my face and hands in my snow-white tunic, worn for the first time this morning, everything covered in one long layer of brown, sticky, reeking mud. At the same time, I see that the boat is gliding swiftly to the very middle of the lake, and that the girl who had fallen backwards when I shoved off is getting up. The first object that jumps to her eye is myself. A frantic laugh rings through the whole garden and echoes through the trees. I get out my handkerchief and pass it confusedly, first over my tunic and then over my face, but in time I realize that this only smudges the mud into me worse than before, and gives me a still more pitiable appearance. Then I make an heroic attempt to burst out laughing myself over the comedy of my miseries, and produce some sort of idiotic neighing. Katerina Andreevna rocks with laughter more than ever, and is hardly able to pronounce her words. "Go, go, quickly, you will catch cold." I run off at full speed from this accursed place, run the whole way back to the house, while in my ears there still rings that merciless, ceaseless laugh. The captain, as he caught sight of me, merely threw his arms out in astonishment. "Nice! Well, you are a pretty sight. How the deuce did you manage it?" I made no answer, banged the door of my own room, and furiously turned the lock twice. Alas, now everything is all over forever. P.S. Is she pretty or is she not? I was so absorbed in my gallantry, condemn yourself to death, wretched man, that I hadn't even time to get a good look at her. Ah, but what does it matter? Tomorrow, whatever happens, I am going back to the regiment, even if I have to sham being ill. Here I should not be able to live down my disgrace. End of Section 3.